You hear a lot about narcissistic mothers, but there isn't nearly as much information about narcissistic fathers. Narcissistic fathers create their own share of misery, and they can have a big effect on their children's lives, particularly their sons. They can also often become bullies. So, what should you do if your narcissistic father is a bully? Narcissistic fathers often leave their children feeling like they are not enough and never will be. This is particularly true for the sons of a narcissistic father, but daughters don't escape their abuse either. That's why it's vital that you understand what you can do to push back against the bullying tactics of your narcissistic father. Let's explore your options. Be compassionate with yourself. Once you recognize that you have a narcissistic bully for a father, you can now start the process of healing from that kind of treatment. The first step in that process is to practice self-compassion. Narcissistic bullies try to make you feel like you're weak when you feel hurt by their treatment. Again, this is particularly true of the interactions between a narcissistic father and his sons. He may tell you to walk it off, or he might insist you're being too sensitive. This is a form of gaslighting because he is trying to make you doubt your interpretation of what has happened. We'll discuss how to deal with the gaslighting momentarily, but you have a right to your feelings, and you want to cultivate compassion for yourself in that situation. Soothe your inner child and let them know that you understand why they would feel bad about what your father has said or done. Make sure you don't just brush it off, but that you do process those feelings and allow them to pass through you. If you try to walk it off, as your father might tell you to do, you're likely to trap that trauma in your body, where it will come back to haunt you again and again. Instead, sit with those emotions, let yourself feel them, and then you can let them go. Document your reality to resist gaslighting. As we discussed before, gaslighting is a tactic the narcissistic bully will use to make you doubt your reality. Sometimes gaslighting is subtle, as when your father says, "I was just joking," even when you know he was not. Other times he might come right out and say, "That didn't happen." To combat this extremely toxic abuse tactic, you should document your own reality. When something happens that makes you feel uncomfortable, write about it in a journal. Write down what happened in detail and how it makes you feel. Your gaslighting father might try to say that he never said something you know he did say. By recording what happened, you can reassert your reality. If he denies it later, you can go back and see the contemporaneous documentation, so you will know you weren't wrong. In some instances, you might also record your conversation with him. This can be illegal in some places if he doesn't know you're doing it, so check your area for the relevant laws before doing this. If you have to let him know you're recording him, you can just say, "Wait, I want to make sure I remember exactly what you're saying, so I'm going to record this conversation." Don't argue with your narcissistic father. Arguing with a narcissist is an exercise in futility. Because narcissists have created a false self-image, infused with grandiose ideas about their superiority, they can't afford to ever admit they're wrong. One of their greatest fears is that they will be exposed as a truly flawed person, and admitting they are wrong is like showing that they are flawed. They can't let that happen, and therefore they will hardly ever admit wrongdoing unless doing so advantages them in some way. That's why arguing with them won't do any good. What's more, when they argue, narcissists talk in circles so as to create confusion and further make you doubt your reality. They will have you asking, "What did he just say?" They want you to be more focused on the confusion than on the substance of the argument. It's another way they can control you. They will also bring up old wounds, what is commonly referred to these days as whataboutism. You'll be talking about the current argument, and they will bring up something you did 2 years ago just to get you off track. In the end, you'll be left feeling confused and even more irritated than before. That's why it's best to simply not argue with them. State your piece and walk away, because you will never win an argument with a narcissist. You can also check out my video on 5 ways to end an argument with a narcissistic father for some more ideas. Don't justify or explain yourself to a narcissistic bully. You also don't want to try to justify or explain yourself to your narcissistic father. He will seize on that as an admission of guilt and use it against you. They don't believe you should ever have to explain yourself if you were in the right. Not only will they not accept your justification or explanation, but they will also see it as vulnerability. They will use it to further manipulate you into admitting you were wrong. That's why you have to simply state your truth and walk away. You can say something like, "Well, it's clear we're never going to agree on this, so we have to just agree to disagree." Then refuse to argue anymore with your narcissistic bully and go about your business. This might be hard if this is your father, but if you do anything else, it will only work against you. It's frustrating because you're simply trying to explain your thought processes in making the decisions you make. The bully doesn't think logically, and they don't really care about how you came to the conclusions you did. They are too busy worrying about their own self-image and making sure that everyone sees them as superior. That's why they will never understand you or why you make the choices you do. Justifying your actions will never get you anywhere with them. It's just a waste of time. Consider going no contact. One of the things you might need to consider if you are an adult child of a narcissistic bully is to cut off all contact with your father. There are a lot of reasons that people don't think about this. Our culture teaches us that we're supposed to love our parents, and when we're not feeling that love, we think there's something wrong with us. The truth is that you should love the people who truly love you and who treat you with respect. You are not actually required to love people who emotionally or physically abuse you. It's okay to get away from them if you don't have any other options. Going no contact with a father who is a narcissistic bully has to be an option on the table. It might be necessary, at least until you can gather your strength and do some healing so that you can be around them and still prevent the abuse. It might also be that you simply need to cut off all contact and never look back. Take legal action if necessary. Let me be perfectly clear here. If you are being physically abused, no matter how old you are, tell someone and get to a safe place away from that abuse. Physical abuse is never the victim's fault, and you don't deserve to be treated that way ever. If you're underage, be sure your mother knows what's going on, and if she won't protect you, tell a teacher, a counselor, or a police officer what is happening. It is never okay for your narcissistic father to harm you physically. It's not okay for him to harm you mentally either, but that's harder to prove. Physical abuse, however, can be documented. Take pictures of any injuries he causes and talk to someone about what is going on. If you're an adult and your narcissistic father threatens you physically, you can take legal action to prevent him from contacting you. Get a restraining order or have him arrested. You don't have to endure physical abuse. Recognize not everyone is like your narcissistic bully. When you're being bullied by a narcissistic father, you might think that everyone's father is like that. I know that's what I thought about my narcissistic mother. I just figured that everyone's mother was as cruel as she was. It wasn't until a friend of mine remarked about how mean my mother was to me that I realized her mother didn't treat her the same way. Of course, you don't know as a child that you're being abused. You grow up in that toxic stew, and until you start to get out into the world, you don't know that what you're going through is actually abusive. If you are being lied to, gaslighted, triangulated, triggered, and devalued, that is abusive, and not all fathers are like that. It isn't normal either, and there is a better way to parent children. You don't have to accept that kind of treatment as just the way it is. Finally, narcissistic fathers can be extremely cruel to their children. They don't have any empathy for how their actions affect other people. They are also solely focused on getting their need for narcissistic supply met. It's something they need almost constantly. They fear being exposed as a flawed individual, and for that reason, they can't ever admit they're wrong. They also see their children as extensions of their own identity, so anything they do to them is fair. They create deep emotional wounds that can affect their children for the rest of their lives. If you're being abused by a bullying, narcissistic father who is constantly triggering you emotionally, I have something that can help. My 5-step roadmap to heal emotional triggers is a free guide that will help you recognize those emotional triggers your father uses against you and defuse them. You can even work on healing the original wounds that caused the triggers. To get a copy delivered directly to your inbox, just click on the link below this video and start the healing process today. Thanks for watching.